Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion, Technology and Great Power Competition, the Value of Public-Private Sector Partnerships, sponsored by Palantir on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Doug Filippone, the Global Defense Lead at Palantir. Now, Doug, before break, we were talking about maybe the problem, right? A lot of data, how to bring that data together. The current strategy maybe hasn't worked as well as in the past, but agencies and DoD specifically are starting to kind of make some progress. And really that progress is coming from, we're benefiting from a lot of the work that the private sector does. And in this case, what the work you're doing, you're bringing in, Palantir is bringing to DoD a lot of your experience. How is this public-private partnership really, why is it so much more important today than maybe ever before?
Well, I think the pace that technology is moving in the commercial sector is something that you really have to pay attention to. And while the government does have some unique needs, the core capabilities are not unique. And so it becomes this like really exciting time where the government can gain efficiencies in terms of time and cost efficiencies, in terms of just time of fielding an effective system, first of all, which is probably the most important thing, but then also getting it for cheaper because you're taking advantage of either the investor base that's sponsoring on the venture side, that's giving entrepreneurs capital to invent something that actually is useful, and then also from the commercial side, these products actually work in the wild, and we're solving problems out there that the government can take advantage of, where you're able to start with 80%, and you can rock and roll from there, as opposed to doing a 2-year RFP process that a very bespoke requirements that then by the time it gets into service members' hands, it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah. I love the 80% solution. A lot of times I think agencies don't understand that. Like, it's much easier to meet that 20% goal than the 100% goal, and maybe change your processes and get 80% there. Where has that happened already? You give us a good example.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, this goes into my earlier point of like the most important part of an IT transformation is to get started, right? And so it's just like, don't spend 3 years doing a blueprint. And so, I think that, like, if you think of some of our work where, you're leveraging on the Airbus side. So, several years ago, we helped out Airbus in terms of understanding the manufacturing of one of their planes, and how could you increase the speed of manufacture and then decrease the cost of it. And then the thing that I'm getting at here is that you don't know what you don't know. And so we started with that problem, and then we moved into the maintenance of the planes. And then how do you look at thousands of sensors that are producing insane amounts of data and make them more efficient? And then how do you figure out where to fix the planes, when to fix the planes, and then allow airlines around the world, who are all competitive, but using that same platform of planes, to collaborate to make the entire fleet better. So, I mean, that's one example of just like, we've done all of that work. It actually works. Would we have to configure that in some capacity, that same technology? Yes. But it turns out that one of our large Army contracts benefited directly from that same technology, where if we looked at, this is several years ago, but we were looking to help the Army understand their readiness. And so that became a huge data problem that had never been tackled before, and it was pretty intense in terms of the scale of the data. If you look at just the HR side of the Army, there's something like 191 systems that have been built over the last, say 40 years or so. And they don't necessarily talk to each other. They're written in different languages. They have different data models, et cetera. And then how do you bring those together so that you just know the full story of a soldier from when they are recruited to the time they retire? That ends up being a hard technical problem, but we were able to apply that same technology and just configure it for a different use case. But you get started, it's basically the pilot where we had something useful was like 13 days, right? And so, the corollary to a government project is like, okay, well, 5 years and $1 billion, and then we'll have it behind somebody's hands. And so software is never done, but you have to have something useful to react to, period.
The Army example is a really good one because readiness, and that's a DoD term, as you well know, but sure. There's readiness in HHS, there's readiness in Interior, the National Park Service or Commerce Department or wherever. Do we have enough of this type of person to meet our needs today in the future, and all of that is an HR problem. So I think understanding the data, where you're at, where you need to go, closing the gap.
Yeah, I mean, and every agency has this issue where they all have a specific mission, and then they have people, equipment, and limited amount of dollars.
Right.
And you're trying to get the most out of all of those people and all of that equipment. And so in terms of understanding where is that equipment, what it's being used for, where's, from a talent management perspective, how am I utilizing my workforce, et cetera, when a crisis happens, the last thing you want to be doing is writing stuff down on a piece of paper and then having somebody put it in Excel. That's been the status quo for a long time, and we're trying to change that. But we're making great progress. It's exciting.
And I think a lot of agencies are understanding the importance of, and I want to go back to something you said, the initial pilot took 13 days. They're understanding of getting those capabilities out more quickly, and they want to test out, okay, let me pull the data I know, like don't let the enemy of good be perfect be the enemy of good, and then let's see where we're at, and then we can improve. Is that kind of a trend you're seeing, that agencies want to kind of get to that initial pilot more quickly, understand what they have, and then make changes and improve?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a huge change. So I've been doing this for about 13 years, and so in the beginning, it was all about a white paper submission to an RFP, and good luck. And so both for industry, it's not attractive for entrepreneurs, and it's not that great for the government. I think everyone would agree with that. And so, but the idea of having prototypes where if an agency has a real problem, just start with that process of saying, does anybody have something that works a little bit? Like show up with a prototype, and then we see from there. And then you start to analyze. You can very quickly assess what's real and what's not, and then you can understand what the best value is going forward, as opposed to, well, I'm promising on paper that I'm going to build something, and then I'll show it to you maybe later.
And that's actually a great segue, because there was an interesting speech by Admiral Gilday at the recent Sea Air Space Conference, and he kind of highlighted this budget constraints versus cost overruns versus partnering with large systems integrators. And I think it tags back to this competition issue as well, where if DoD is spending all this money, what are they getting from it, and what are they seeing from it? And if you're taking $1 billion and 5 years later and Dimers doesn't work, or
right.
pick your number, your ERP system that doesn't work, what are they really doing here? So I think, is that the move? Is there a move that you're seeing that DoD is driving towards, again, shorter turnaround periods, more competition, really driving the marketplace in a new way?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to, right? So it's like they can't survive either on a flat or a down budget. Like, you have to modernize, and you're going to have to figure out a way to get the acquisition process to go through this. I think, Ms. Hsu was during some of her confirmation hearings, she was kind of highlighting some of the important problems with bringing in new companies, in terms of, like, if you get a prototype and it's a successful prototype, how do you shorten that cycle where you can get to production, where you have something real, and how do you get to production? So what Admiral Gilday, I'm not speaking for him, but my interpretation of what he was saying was along the lines of, like, look, if you can have off-ramps, it's like you either modernize these systems, and under the existing contract, the contractor can either make them better quickly, or you can have them off-ramped. But the idea is you have to have competition where a new prototype can come in and say, yes, we can actually do this. You have the existing system, can keep doing what it is, but as you prove, it's like, okay, you can do this for half the money, and you can on-ramp or off-ramp these things. That's an important structure that I think Ms. Hsu is trying to get at, but we do need help on the acquisition side for that, to help what Admiral Gilday is talking about.
In many ways, what you've just described is the other transaction agreement, other transaction authority, the OTA process. And I know there's a big push. I spoke with someone recently who's retiring from government after 40 years, and she was talking about, you really do need to expand the OTA authority, commercial solution opening, CSOs to across government. Palantir has taken, and I mean this in a good way, advantage of OTAs in a big way, and really shown how they can work.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, for us, it took us a long time to break into the government, just to be clear. I think most people who listen to the show know some of the history there. But the important thing is that when we've won competitions, or when we've won any contract, we've had the ability to compete and show what our company can actually do. and I will sign up for any competition where you can actually show something real. Like that's a great thing, I think.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, hey, instead of reverse engineering the requirements. I mean, that's one of the not that I want to identify a bunch of problems here, but one of the things that I'm excited about is getting away from reverse engineering requirements. Like if you knew the requirements, like just start with the problem set. If you knew what the requirements was, you wouldn't have the problem.
It's true, and a lot of times those requirements change so quickly over time, and by the time they write the requirements, I mean, you and I, I'm sure, could have an off-the-record conversation about many examples where it's challenging. And I think that's actually the show me, don't tell me approach to procurement is really what you're talking about here. And do you get a sense that that's one of those reasons why not just Palantir, but a lot of companies are able to move from that initial startup, emerging technology phase to being a more regular supplier or provider of services to the government?
Yeah, I mean, I believe like from a venture perspective, I mean, look, this is what I believe, you know, as a person. America has some of the most talented, if not the most talented software engineers in the world, period. And it's important to get that subset of our society working for problems for the government. That's important. And so from a venture community standpoint, you're trying to give money to companies that are going to solve these hard problems, but then those companies have to have a path to profitability or viability at a minimum. And so when they compete for a hard problem and they solve it, and they're so proud that they're like, hey, we solved this really hard problem and it's exciting, they need to have a path where it's like, okay, I know that if I keep doing this, or if I hire 100 more people, I can keep making my widget or whatever it is that they're doing, and it becomes a real business. And if the government doesn't fix that part of the problem, understanding the path from prototype to production quicker, and again, Ms. Xu has talked about this a decent amount, I think, well, we're going to go backwards. It's going to go back to what Admiral Gilday is talking about, is like we're stuck in this paradigm where you can't modernize.
And the great power competition becomes that much more of a competition.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the end of the day. I will tell you, China is not competing with their industrial base, right? And so they're going after all of their winners, and they're investing in those winners, and they're picking winners. And in a capitalist society, that's what I think, like, you know, some of the government folks, it's like, we should pick winners. That's okay. You know, we want that, right? And so you just have to have, you don't have to have, everyone has to be a winner. It's just.
And when you pick winners, it also forces other people to get better. So
absolutely,
whoever your competition is, oh, well, we keep losing, how do we get better? And that's going to benefit.
Yep, they have to change. Yep.
Doug, well, unfortunately, we're out of time. This was a great conversation, so I really do appreciate your time. Let me thank my guest. Doug Filippone is the Global Defense Lead at Palantir. Doug, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion, Technology and Great Power Competition, the Value of Public-Private Sector Partnerships, sponsored by Palantir on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Palantir.